The sales office was all marble and glass, the kind of place that made a statement about wealth before anyone spoke a word. Everything about it was designed to impress. The floors were polished to a mirror shine. The walls were cream and gold. There was a massive model of the building in the center of the room, its tiny windows glowing with tiny lights. A perfect replica of the 50-story tower that dominated the city skyline. The furniture was modern and expensive. Leather chairs, glass tables, art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. The saleswoman behind the desk was named Vanessa. She was 33 years old, impeccably dressed, and she had been working in luxury real estate for 8 years. She had learned to read people in the first 30 seconds of meeting them. She could tell, just by looking at someone, whether they could afford what she was selling. She was very good at her job. She was also very, very wrong. The doors opened and a massively built man walked in jeans, work boots. A dark Henley shirt stretched across his enormous chest. His arms were thick with muscle, his shoulders broad. His frame the kind of size that made doorways seem smaller. He had a handsome, weathered face, short military-style hair, with a little gray at the temples, and the calm, steady eyes of someone who had seen everything and was unbothered by any of it. He was holding the hand of a small girl, 7 years old, with light brown hair and 2 simple pigtails and bright, trusting eyes. She looked around the sales office with quiet curiosity, taking it all in the way children do, absorbing everything, judging nothing. Vanessa looked up from her desk. Her practiced professional smile flickered for just a second. She had already assessed him and found him lacking. The jeans were worn, not new. The work boots were scuffed. The Henley shirt was high quality but simple. He looked like a construction worker, maybe a foreman, maybe a contractor, but definitely not someone who could afford a penthouse in one of the most expensive buildings in the city. The child was cute, but that didn't matter. Cute didn't pay the bills. "Good afternoon," Vanessa said, her voice professionally pleasant but with a subtle edge. "How can I help you?" The man walked to the desk. His daughter stayed close beside him. Up close, he was even more imposing, massive, solid, the kind of man who could pick up a refrigerator without breaking a sweat. But his voice was calm, soft, almost gentle. "I'm interested in the penthouse," he said. Vanessa blinked. Just once. Just long enough to process what he had just said. "The penthouse," she repeated, her voice rising slightly on the second syllable. "Yes," he said. "The penthouse. I'd like to see it." She looked at him again, really looked this time. The jeans, the boots, the Henley shirt, the worn hands, the calloused fingers, the lack of an expensive watch, the lack of designer sunglasses, the lack of anything that suggested wealth. She made her decision. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "The penthouse is by appointment only, for qualified buyers only. Perhaps you'd like to see a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor? The views are still quite nice." She was not sorry. She was not being polite. She was dismissing him. The man looked at her. His expression did not change. He did not get angry, did not argue, did not defend himself. He just stood there, calm and steady, looking at her with the same quiet attention he had given her when he walked in. "I understand," he said, "but I think you should see this first." He reached into his jacket pocket, a simple leather jacket, worn but high quality, and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the desk. His hands were enormous, the hands of a man who had worked hard for everything he had. Vanessa looked at the folder. She did not want to open it. She had already made up her mind about this man. She knew who he was. He was just another dreamer who thought he could afford something he couldn't. But there was something about the way he was looking at her, something that made her feel, for the first time in 8 years, like she might have made a mistake. She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the documents. The color drained from her face. She looked up at him. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. She had just refused to show the owner of the building his own penthouse. His name was Owen Callahan, and he was not who he appeared to be. On the surface, he looked like a construction worker. He dressed like one. He carried himself like one. He had the calloused hands and weathered face of a man who worked with his hands. He looked like he had spent the morning on a job site, not like he had spent the morning reviewing the financials of a multi-million-dollar development company. But that was exactly what he had done. Owen Callahan was the founder and owner of Callahan Development Group, one of the most successful real estate development firms in the city. He had built 10 buildings in the last 6 years, including the 50-story tower, whose sales office he was standing in. He employed hundreds of people. He had a net worth that would make most people's heads spin. But he didn't show it. He didn't wear expensive clothes or drive an expensive car. He didn't flash his money or brag about his success. He just went to work every day and did what he had always done. He built things. He built things that lasted. He built things that mattered. Before he was a developer, he was a Navy SEAL. 12 years in the service. 5 deployments. Places that didn't have names. Missions that didn't have details. Brotherhood that couldn't be explained. He had seen things and done things that most people couldn't even imagine. He had lost friends and carried their memories and learned to keep going even when it felt like the world had stopped. He had left the service when his wife Rachel got sick. She had been diagnosed with cancer in her early 30s, and he had realized that the most important mission he would ever have was being there for her. He had been by her side for the last year of her life, holding her hand in the hospital room, making her laugh even when she didn't feel like laughing, promising her that he would take care of their daughter. When Rachel died, Owen had been broken. He had lost the love of his life, the mother of his child, the woman who had made everything make sense. He had been a father who held his crying daughter and didn't know how to tell her that everything was going to be okay. But then something had happened. He had started building. It had started small, a small renovation here, a small project there. He had used his savings, his training, his refusal to give up. He had worked with his hands, poured concrete, swung hammers, built things that were real and solid and lasting. And slowly, building by building, he had become something else. He had become a builder of more than just buildings. He had become a builder of futures for himself, for his daughter, for the hundreds of people who worked for him. He had become the kind of man who could walk into a room and command respect without saying a word. But he never forgot who he was. He was still the same man who had grown up with nothing, the same man who had earned everything he had, the same man who knew that clothes don't make the person, the work does. He was still a single father raising a 7-year-old daughter, and he was still, deep down, the same man who had held his wife's hand in the hospital and promised her that he would make their daughter proud. That was why he was here today. He had built this building, the 50-story tower that dominated the skyline. It was his 10th building, his most ambitious, his greatest achievement. He had designed the penthouse for himself and Lily, their new home, their new start, the place where they would build the rest of their lives together. He had not come here to show off. He had not come here to prove anything. He had come here to buy his daughter a home, and he had been refused. Her name was Vanessa. She had been in luxury real estate for 8 years, and she was very good at her job. She was polished and professional, with expensive clothes and perfect hair, and the kind of practice smile that made people feel welcome and assessed at the same time. She had sold penthouses to celebrities, executives, and billionaires. She had closed deals that had made her commissions larger than most people's annual salaries. She had a reputation for being the best, the one who could read people, close deals, and make the impossible happen. She also had a habit of judging people by their appearance. It was not a conscious thing. It was a professional skill, the ability to assess someone's worth in the first 30 seconds of meeting them. It was the ability to tell who was serious and who was wasting her time, who could afford what she was selling and who was just looking. She was very good at it, but she had not expected Owen Callahan. When she looked at him, she saw jeans and work boots and a man who looked like he had been swinging a hammer all morning. She saw a man with worn hands and calloused fingers and the kind of physique that came from physical labor. She saw a man who was holding the hand of a small girl and looked like he had stopped in on his way home from a job site. She did not see a man who could afford a penthouse. She did not see a man who owned the building. She saw what she expected to see: a working man, a single father, a dreamer who didn't know his place. She had seen 1,000 men like him in her career, and she had dismissed them all the same way. But he was different. When she opened the folder, she saw his name on the documents. Owen Callahan, the owner of the building, the developer who had built this tower from the ground up. She looked up at him, really looked this time, and saw something she hadn't seen before: the calm, steady eyes of a man who didn't need to prove anything. The quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he had built. She had been wrong, completely wrong, and now she was pale, embarrassed, unable to speak. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Vanessa stared at the folder. The documents were real. She knew the legal documents, knew the signatures, knew the seals. Everything was in order. She looked up at him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The practiced professional words that usually came so easily, the ones that closed deals and charmed clients, had completely deserted her. "Mr. Callahan," she finally managed. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't realize." "It's fine," he said. His voice was calm, the same calm it had been the entire time. He was not angry. He was not trying to make her feel bad. He was just stating a fact. "I understand. I don't look like the kind of man who can afford a penthouse. It's an easy mistake to make." She opened her mouth to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? "I'm sorry I judged you. I'm sorry I refused you. I'm sorry I assumed you were poor because of how you were dressed. I don't need a tour," he continued, still calm, still steady. "I know every inch of this building. I built it. I designed the penthouse myself, the floor plan, the finishes, the view from the master bedroom. I know exactly where the natural light hits at sunrise and where the city lights reflect at night." He paused. His daughter tugged on his hand. "Dad," she said, "can we go see it now?" He looked down at her, this small, ordinary child who was his whole world, and smiled. The first real smile Vanessa had seen from him. "Yes, honey," he said. "We're going home." He turned to Vanessa, still calm, still steady, still unbothered. "Thank you for your time," he said. "Have a good afternoon." Then he took his daughter's hand and walked away. Vanessa stood frozen behind the desk, watching them go. She had just refused to show the owner of the building his own penthouse. She had just dismissed a Navy SEAL, a developer, a single father who had built 10 buildings and was building an 11th for his daughter. She had judged him by his clothes and found him lacking. And he had not argued. He had not gotten angry. He had not made her feel small. He had just shown her the documents and walked away. She sank back into her chair. She would not recover from this for a long time. Owen and Lily walked through the marble lobby toward the private elevator. Lily was skipping slightly, not a full skip, but the kind of bouncy walk that children do when they are excited about something. She had not understood what had happened with the saleswoman. She had just seen her father being calm, the way he always was. "Dad," she said, "why was that lady so quiet?" "She made a mistake," Owen said. "What kind of mistake?" He thought about how to explain this to a 7-year-old. "She thought I couldn't afford to buy the penthouse," he said, "because of the way I was dressed." Lily looked at his clothes, his jeans, his Henley shirt, his boots. They were the same clothes he wore every day. He had worn them to school pickup and grocery shopping and the park. They were his clothes. "Your clothes are fine," she said, with the absolute certainty of a child who didn't understand why adults cared about such things. He smiled down at her. "They are," he said, "but sometimes people make assumptions. They think they know what they're looking at, and they don't." "Is that what she did?" "Yes," he said. "She thought she knew who we were, and she was wrong." Lily thought about this. She was embarrassed, she said. "Yes," he said. "She was." Should we have made her feel better? He looked at his daughter, this small, ordinary child, who wanted everyone to feel better, even the people who were unkind to them. "We didn't make her feel worse," he said. "That's enough." They stepped into the private elevator. The doors closed. The elevator began its smooth ascent toward the top floor. Lily pressed her face against the glass, looking out at the city as it fell away beneath them. "Dad," she said, "are we really going to live here?" "Yes," he said. "I built this building for us." "For me?" "For us," he said. "It's home, the way home should be." She turned away from the window and looked at him. "You built a building for us," she said. "I built 10 buildings," he said. "But this one is special. I designed it for you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What did you do before you built buildings?" He looked at her. He had told her some of it, the part she could understand, but she was 7 now. She could understand more than she used to. "I used to be a soldier," he said. A Navy SEAL. It's what I did before you were born. A SEAL, she said. Like the animal? He laughed. Like the animal, he said. The military version. The Navy's elite fighting force. Did you fight? Sometimes, he said. But mostly I protected people. That's what SEALs do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Is that why you're so big? He laughed again. Partly, he said. The training makes you strong. But I was already big when I started. She looked at his arms, his shoulders, his massive chest. She had never known him to be any other way. Are you still a soldier? She asked. No, he said. I left the Navy when your mom got sick. I needed to be here for her. And for you. Do you miss it? He thought about this for a moment. The brotherhood, the mission, the sense of being part of something bigger than himself. He did miss it, sometimes. But he had found something else, something that mattered just as much. No, he said. I have everything I need right here. The elevator doors opened onto the penthouse. It was everything Owen had imagined and more. The space was vast, open and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the entire city spread out below. The ceilings were high, the finishes were elegant. The kitchen had marble countertops and modern appliances. Every detail had been designed with care, with precision, with the knowledge that this was where he would be raising his daughter. Lily gasped. She ran forward, her small hands pressing against the glass. Dad, she shouted. Look, we can see everything. He walked over and stood beside her. The city stretched out before them, buildings and bridges and cars and people, all of it small and distant from this height. The sky was beginning to change, the sun setting on the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of gold and pink and deep blue. You can see the park, Lily said, pointing. I can see the park. And the river. Is that the river? That's the river, he said. And that building, what's that building? That's where I used to work, he said. The first building I ever built. It's not as tall as this one, but it was the start of everything. Why did you build all these buildings? She asked. He looked at her, this small, ordinary girl who had changed everything about his life without even trying. Because I wanted to build something for you, he said. I wanted you to have a home that was safe and stable and beautiful. I wanted you to have something that would last. She looked at the city, then back at him. I love it, she said. I love it already. He felt something settle in his chest. Not pride exactly, something quieter, something more peaceful. It was the feeling of knowing that he had done something right. Let's go explore, he said. They walked through the penthouse together, through the enormous living room, the kitchen, the dining room, the hallways. Lily was excited by everything, running ahead and coming back to tell him what she had found. There's a bathtub, she said. A giant bathtub. The master bathroom has a soaking tub, he said. And a shower? Like a big one. A huge one, he said, with multiple shower heads. This is amazing, she said. This is the best home ever. They ended up in the room that would be Lily's bedroom. It had a window seat that overlooked the park, and shelves for her books, and plenty of space for her to spread out her drawings and her toys. This is yours, he said. Mine. All yours. You can design it however you want. Paint the walls, pick the furniture, whatever you want. She looked at the room with new eyes, the eyes of someone who was seeing her future. Can I have a big bookshelf? She said. Yes. Can I have a beanbag chair? Yes. Can I have a dog? He laughed. We'll talk about that, he said. She grinned. She ran over and hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his massive frame. Thank you, she said. Thank you for everything. He hugged her back, his enormous arms wrapping around her small body. You're welcome, he said. Thank you for being my daughter. That evening, they made dinner in the penthouse kitchen. It was the first time they had cooked in this space. The first time they had used the marble countertops and the modern appliances and the beautiful island. It was the first time they had sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the city lights while they ate. Owen made pasta, the same pasta he had been making for years, the one he had learned from his grandmother, the one that had become their family tradition. It was simple and comforting and exactly what they needed. Lily sat at the island, drawing on a piece of paper while he cooked. Dad, she said, that lady today, the one at the desk. Yes. Do you think she's still embarrassed? He thought about Vanessa. He had not been angry with her, not really. She had made a mistake, but it was an understandable one. He was a man who dressed simply and worked with his hands. He looked like a working man because he was a working man, even if the work he did now was different from the work he used to do. I don't know, he said, but I hope she learns from it. What should she learn? He stirred the pasta. That you can't judge people by their appearance, he said. That people who have the most are often the ones who don't show it, and that the people who have the least are often the ones who deserve the most. Lily thought about this. Should I be nice to everyone? She asked. Yes, he said, even when they're not nice to you. Especially when they're not nice to you. Even if they're mean? Even if they're mean, he said. Being mean doesn't make you feel better. It makes you feel worse. Being nice makes you feel better, even if the other person doesn't deserve it. She nodded solemnly. She was taking this in, filing it away, turning it into something she would carry with her. Okay, she said. I'll be nice to everyone. That's my girl, he said. He served the pasta. They ate together at the kitchen table, looking out at the city lights, talking about her day and her drawings and the plans for the weekend. It was the first night in their new home. It would not be the last. The next morning, Owen went back to the sales office. He was wearing the same clothes, the same jeans, the same boots, the same Henley shirt. He had not changed his appearance, because he had not needed to. He was comfortable in his skin, in his clothes, in who he was. Vanessa was behind the desk when he walked in. Her face went pale when she saw him. Mr. Callahan, she said, standing up quickly. I'm so sorry about yesterday. I don't know what I was thinking. I should never have. It's fine, he said. I didn't come here to hear an apology. She blinked. Then why? He placed a folder on the desk. Not the same folder from yesterday, a different one. These are the final documents for the penthouse, he said. Everything is ready. I just need you to witness my signature. She opened the folder. Her hands were shaking slightly. Mr. Callahan, she said, I really am sorry. I was unprofessional. I judged you based on. I know what you judge me based on, he said, and I understand why you did it. You do this job every day. You see people like me who can't afford what you're selling. You've learned to separate the lookers from the buyers. It's what makes you good at your job. She was quiet. But sometimes, he continued, you're going to be wrong. Sometimes the person who looks like they have nothing has everything. And sometimes the person who looks like they have everything has nothing. She nodded. I learned that yesterday, she said. Did you? He asked. Did you really learn it? She hesitated. I'd like to think I did, she said. But I'm not sure I'll ever stop making assumptions. It's what I do. It's what I've been trained to do. I understand, he said. I just want you to remember this feeling. The way you felt when you opened that folder and saw my name. The way you felt when you realized you were wrong. Remember that, and you'll do better next time. She nodded again. There were tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. Thank you for being kind. He signed the documents. She witnessed them. The deal was closed. Before he left, he turned back to her. One more thing, he said. Yes, next time someone comes in who looks like they don't belong, he said, show them the penthouse, even if they can't afford it. Even if it's just a dream, because the dream is what matters. The dream is where it starts. A month later, Owen and Lily were settled in the penthouse. The walls were painted. The furniture was arranged. Lily's room had been transformed with a big bookshelf and a beanbag chair and drawings on the walls. The kitchen table had become their gathering place, the place where they ate and talked and made plans for the future. Owen sat at the table one night, looking out at the city lights. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the Navy SEAL teams to the hospital room where Rachel died, from the first small building to the 50-story tower, from the man who had nothing to the man who had built everything. He had been underestimated his whole life. People looked at him and saw a big man, a man who worked with his hands, a man who was more comfortable on a construction site than in a boardroom. They assumed he was just muscle, just brawn. Just a simple man who didn't understand the world of money and power. They were wrong. He understood money. He understood power. He had used both to build something real, something that would last, something that would make a difference in the world. But he also understood something else. He understood that the most important thing he had built was not a building. It was a life with his daughter, a life that was full and rich and meaningful, regardless of how much money was in the bank. Lily came into the kitchen. She was wearing her pajamas, her hair mussed from sleep. "Dad," she said. "What is it, honey? Are you coming to bed?" He smiled. "Soon," he said. "I'll be there soon." She climbed onto his lap. His enormous arms wrapped around her small frame. "I love this home," she said. "I love you," he said. "Did you really build all this for me?" "I built it for us," he said. "Everything I do for us." She snuggled against him. "Thank you," she said. "You're the best dad in the world." He hugged her tighter. "I'm just your dad," he said. "That's the only thing I need to be." The saleswoman refused to show a single dad the penthouse. She judged him by his clothes, his boots, his calloused hands. She assumed he couldn't afford it because he didn't look like he belonged. Minutes later, she turned pale. She had just refused to show the owner of the building his own penthouse. But that was not the story. The story was not about the refusal. It was not about the embarrassment. It was not about the moment when the saleswoman realized she was wrong. The story was about a man who had been underestimated his whole life and had never let it stop him. It was about a Navy SEAL who became a builder who became a millionaire who never forgot who he was, a single father raising a daughter, a man who worked with his hands, a man who had built everything he had from nothing. The saleswoman had learned a lesson that day. She had learned not to judge people by their appearance. She had learned that the people who have the most are often the ones who show the least. She had learned that assumptions are dangerous, and that kindness is always the right choice. But more importantly, she had learned that people are not what they seem. Owen Callahan did not look like a millionaire. He did not dress like a developer. He did not act like someone who owned the building. But he was all of those things. And the most important thing he was, the thing that mattered most, was a father who had built a home for his daughter, a father who had never forgotten what mattered, a father who had taught the saleswoman that the people who deserve respect are not always the ones who demand it. He was quiet. He was steady. He was calm. And he was the owner of the building. The saleswoman refused to show a single dad the penthouse. She judged him by his clothes and found him lacking. But he was not lacking. He was the owner of the building. The story is not about revenge. It is not about making the saleswoman feel small. It is about dignity, about quiet strength, about the difference between what people see and what is actually there. Owen Callahan had been underestimated his whole life. He had been judged, dismissed, and overlooked. And he had never let it stop him. He built 10 buildings. He raised a daughter. He kept his quiet dignity intact. And when the saleswoman turned pale, he did not gloat. He did not shame her. He just walked away. That is what real strength looks like. That is what it means to be a man.